It's time to break down everything you need to know about the Generation 10 of Pokemon leaks. Pokemon Wind and Wave, slated to be announced and revealed on Pokemon Day, the 30th anniversary at the end of February. Strap in, this is gonna be epic. This has been one of the most unprecedented leak seasons in Pokemon history, as the Terra leak has unveiled a ton of information as to what we can expect for the upcoming Pokemon games, Wind and Wave. And in this video, I'm going to break it all down. We've got an epic resource here from Pokios that has summarized and consolidated so much of this information. We're going to walk you through it, we're going to give our take, and we're going to get hyped up for the 30th year of Pokemon. I am so excited for the 10th generation. As always, hit that like button, subscribe if you guys are new, and stay in the know for Pokemon news, leaks, rumors, and more right here on the aDrive channel. All right, let's start this off with timing. We are anticipating this to be releasing in the second half of 2026, with DLC expansion played for 27. The internal documents leaked. This is codenamed Gaia. Again, titles are indicating Wind and Wave as the names. We're going to dive into that a little bit more, but a lot of things in the planning here, but again, focusing primarily on Gaia or the upcoming Gen titles. The game titles actually came from Gaia K Test and Gaia N Test, which the letters stood for Kaze and Nami, Wind and Wave, pointing towards this thematic focus. And then diving a little bit deeper, Game Freak and the Pokemon Horizons anime team specifically stated that they wanted to avoid sea travel and island exploration in the anime to avoid overlapping with Generation's 10 settings and themes. So these internal conversations have ultimately led to us being able to conclude this. They have a lot of highlights and ambitions in terms of a world designed to expand endlessly, strong emphasis on weather systems, wind, sea, and natural phenomena, exploration-driven gameplay across islands and open environments, and a structure closer to an open world and MMO rather than their traditional linear routes. We've got a ton of images here representing this stuff, and we can see this beautiful shot here of the main character protagonist with an Eevee, a Snorlax resting, Charmander. There's a lot of things to be excited about in terms of what the visuals of this game look like. I, for one, am stoked to see how this all comes together. We also know that we've got some internal testing from them, trying out different wind effects, underwater environments, waves, wave splashes. There's that really cool Dodonzo video. So a lot of stuff there, showcasing some internal stuff of what they've actually been working on. So that's what leads us to believe that the game is going to be called Wind and Wave. It's going to be island exploration. And we've got this massive region and game map that we can kind of deduce that the game is going to be based off of, which is that it's based on Indonesia and Southeast Asia. There were a lot of thoughts that it might be a Greek-based region, but now the Indonesian concept seems to be pretty much locked in this archipelago base world with approximately 54 islands of varying size. Unfortunately, we don't have a ton of information on this, but it seems that the map is going to be awesome, diverse, and almost Alola 2.0 in a really cool way. On a personal note, I really loved exploring Alola. I thought that there was a lot to do there. The islands were really fun, and to be able to travel that and travel the open sea gives me like Wind Waker vibes. There's tremendous potential here that I'm very excited about. Before I dive into the main gimmick of the game, Majin, I want to let you guys know that we just have 48 hours left on our historic Kickstarter campaign for my game Elestrals Awakened. We set the record for the #1 funded video game in 2025, and we are closing our late backing on Friday. So this is really your last chance to get involved in this game at the ground floor. We have a $25 copy of Switch or Steam, which allows you to get the game when it releases for less than it's actually going to release for, and support our development. And then if you get the digital deluxe tier, you can actually get beta access to the game and play it early. Shady Penguin and I are teaming up to make Elestrals Awakened something truly great. We're pouring all of our love and passion and excitement for this type of genre into our own game and making something really epic. So if you have not backed us on Kickstarter yet, this is legitimately the last chance. We are closing late pledge and moving over to BackerKit this Friday. So head to the link in the description below. Go back Elestrals Awakened on Kickstarter. You don't want to miss out on it. This is going to be historic, epic, and incredible, and I appreciate your support. The next thing to talk about is the Majin gimmick. This is a gameplay gimmick. It appears to be weather-based moves or effects, although things are a little unclear. We do have a video that surfaced with Pikachu kind of expanding and contracting and some little clouds floating above it. Some really interesting stuff related to that. So we'll have to see how this gimmick all plays out, but I'm very excited to see kind of how they're able to introduce the thematics of weather into the game in a cool way. The next main topic is the Rotom Scooter, which is going to be the main methodology of transportation. This gives a lot of vibes to kind of Scarlet and Violet, where you can use the little Pokemon transponder thing to control your Pokemon and run around with them. I guess some early documents indicated that, players were going to be able to ride all the different Pokemon, but they ended up scrapping that and simplifying it for a scooter, and then you kind of control the Pokemon and traverse the region that way, with the player character being pulled from behind. I think this is a pretty elegant solution to the problem, and I don't honestly have an issue with it. I think it's really neat, and I'm excited to see how this scooter can evolve based on the different terrain, and then how they're able to utilize Pokemon in different ways. We read a rumor that talked about how, like, Golem can go down mountainsides really fast, but like Rapidash is better on flat land and stuff. I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff in regards to the travel, so I can't wait to see kind of what they do with that. When we look at development timelines and beta builds, in May 2021 was our initial evaluations, which goes to show how much, how long back they start to do some thinking about these types of things, which I find fascinating as someone who's designing my own games. They had a minimal plot outline back in July. They had some early script and narratives. A lot of these things are likely reworked, changed, or completely discarded, so we have to kind of keep that in mind. They had a core theme of an endless story. They wanted to really focus on infinity as a big piece of things. And they also wanted to kind of focus on wind and wave being described as invisible forces that move people forward, shape nature, Pokemon, and history itself. The setting and the regional inspiration is very much so clearly Southeast Asia. And then they've got some main characters here. You've got a 13-year-old city child living in a large metropolis. The story deliberately avoids the traditional rural starting point, going for a more modern day city to create contrast. It talks about you living on a local island with your friend and rival. There's all these different characters. You've got your protagonist, your mother. There's apparently an infant sibling at the beginning, and then by the story's end, the baby learns to walk and talk, which I find to be really interesting. Showing some more progression. I think it was like Red and Blue, where your rival Blue or Gary ends up kind of like changing his sprite throughout the game, and I think that that's something that I feel like a lot of the newer Pokemon games have lacked, is that feeling of progression in the characters. They do it through like writing, but I don't know if they do it like as much visually, and sometimes it's hard to deduce kind of how all that plays out. The next piece is the seed Pokemon, though, which is really interesting. This single experimental Pokemon designed to act as both a narrative core and key gameplay system for Generation 10. It has no fixed final form, and it has near infinite variation that is shaped by the growth, environment, and player interaction. The presentations explicitly cite Spore as an inspiration, though there might be more emphasis on emotional bonding rather than pure simulation. According to legend, it only begins to evolve when brought near the islands inhabited by the Storm and Wave legendary Pokemon, when its final form is determined based on how it's raised. It's not just a creature, but a system. Its growth directly affects the world around it, shaping islands, environments, and ecosystems. There's so much potential here to explore with this concept, and it's one that I'm really excited about, and I hope it remains in the game, because I think it's really fascinating how it's almost like Spin to 2.0 in a way. The next topic is our box legendaries for Wind and Wave. There's the Storm and Wind legendary, and both of these are based on Elder Guardian figures. So you've got an Elder Guardian figure residing on an isolated storm-covered island, and then you've got another remote island surrounded by powerful seas. So they're meant to be these Elder legendaries. They're not portrayed as traditional villains or mandatory bosses. They act as moral and narrative gatekeepers. So it's interesting to say that capturing or confronting them is not strictly required to reach an ending, but is necessary to achieve the true ending, reinforcing the game's non-linear structure. They talk about some antagonists and central conflict. There's a land development group, which I think is very fitting. There's a big focus on the 18 major milestone events, themed around sustainability for gameplay structure. Obviously, adventure is a big focus, but they're kind of ditching the traditional gyms and kind of more so focusing on a more freely open experience for players to traverse. There's a legendary islands and a procedural world. It says that islands are procedurally generated with their shape, encounters, and environment determined by the seed Pokemon's growth. Smaller islands serve as raid areas, mid-sized ones connect to other players, and a single large island is reserved for the legendary Pokemon. This system reinforces the idea of an ever-changing world shaped by player choice and growth. And then the ending and post-game, it says that it concludes not with a definitive resolution, but with the end of a long vacation. The protagonist returns to city life while the world continues. The final scene emphasizes gentle wind, calm waves, and growth across generations. Very cool stuff. Obviously, a lot to dive into. We take a fast forward here. They had early test builds in September 23. In December 23, they had the first internal Gaia ROM, so that was a couple years ago. In March, they had the first functional Gaia implementations. In early 2024, they started to do technical and rendering tests rather than gameplay or content. That's where a lot of these screenshots came from of the Charizards. A lot of people are quite excited about how the flames interact with the environment and what that could mean. And it seems like there's, quite a bit of stuff being added here. We see the screenshots of the Luminion, the Charizard in the city, and then even moving forward to June of 2024, they're starting to, it says they've entered a phase of strategic realignment. They've got a formal vision document. They're all focusing on a long-term vision. And this is where we start to see some of these screenshots, a noticeable step forward in the visual state of internal builds by mid 2024. And this is the introduction of both the male and female character player model into the internal builds. Very, very cool there. And then this is where we start to kind of dive into even more of the internal stuff. We've got the professor included in this. He was envisioned as a young researcher, while the only elderly authority figure was the hotel chairman, but it's possible that could change. There's been a lot of theories and thoughts that the professor is based on Charles Darwin, so that's something to kind of keep an eye out on. And then we dive into some more hidden repository logs, asset summaries, things of that nature. There's more assets for Majin. It seems as though there's some really interesting stuff there in terms of the different types. There's some different Majin type-based variants: Psychic, Ghost, Fire, Rock, Ground, and Ice. These could possibly change, but this may be some thoughts into kind of what some of these more important Pokemon look like, and maybe what Pokemon get new forms. So that's something that I'm quite interested in. And then there's different Titan or boss assets. There's Electric, Dragon, Ghost, Ground, Water, and Bug. These are just data observations, but we'll have to wait and see kind of how that is. And then there's gym assets as well. These are just file-based findings, but Dark Poison, Fairy Steel, Flying, Fighting. And then there could be one other, so they're still trying to kind of determine that. But again, a lot of this stuff can change over time. But the thought right now is that there's going to be 18 total type-based challenges, eight type of gyms, 5 Titans, 5 Team Star Bosses. That's what they did in Scarlet and Violet. Looking to kind of replicate that in this game, but with the sustainability goals. So you would still have all types represented, and you would be able to kind of challenge all of them, which I think is good. I think it's good to have that kind of representation. They talk about biome-based world design. You've got deserts, grasslands, snowfield, volcano, and wetlands. So it seems like there's quite a different biomes there. So I'm quite excited to see how that all comes into play. And then you've got some world structure, some major urban areas, Poke Centers, hotels, bridges, gazebos, snow, ice cliffs, nothing too crazy. One thing that is interesting though is that the reported development budget is about 20 million USD, making it one of the most expensive mainline projects to date. I just find it fascinating how inexpensive Pokemon games are related to what they make. I mean, that's what running a business is, right? So I'm not knocking them for it, but it is crazy to think about some of these studios that spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to produce games. And then Pokemon's over here like, yeah, we'll spend 10, maybe 20 million to make this game. And that turns into an engine that drives hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars for their company. It is actually insane. It's actually mind-blowing, dude. Like, I mentioned, I promoted my Kickstarter in the middle of this video, and we raised 1.5 million, and we're putting all of that into creating our game, and we're going to come out with a game that, costs us about, $1.5 million to make. The fact that they're making their AAA games at, 10 million, or in this case, 20 million, and then sell hundreds of, it's mind-boggling, to be honest. But I think players have wanted more out of the franchise, and I'm curious if, with this new budget, we're going to kind of get some of that. We're going to get a little bit more depth, a little bit more adventure. And it seems as though they certainly have a big scope here. And there's certainly a lot of thoughts about, this game being more than what we've seen in the past. So I'm excited to see that and kind of see how it all comes together. So that is a lot of the stuff. There's still some internal discussions about the names, what they could be, but it seems as though Wind and Wave is a pretty good, solid bet here in terms of what to expect. And I'm excited to see these multiple islands, these island themes. And honestly, I want to see starters, dude. Like, that's one of the things I'm most excited about, is seeing the starter Pokemon get revealed. I think that's going to be amazing. I'll put the link to the Pokeos article in the description if you guys want to peruse it. It does go in a little bit more depth, but I figured we'd cover the high level version of the main stuff, and I'm super stoked to see what happens next. We're about 5 weeks away from Pokemon Day, maybe 6-ish. So we're going to have a blast covering that and seeing the starters for Gen 10. So hang tight there. Don't forget, you can back our Kickstarter for the last chance right now in late pledge. 25 bucks gets you a copy of the game on Switch or Steam when it releases. Digital Deluxe Caster gets you the beta access to the game when that comes out, and you can help us make an incredibly awesome game. We're doing something really special, myself and Shady Penguin teaming up to make Elestrals Awaken, but this is your last chance to back because we are closing Kickstarter on Friday, so do it now. Use the link in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching this one. Let me know your thoughts are, and I'll see you guys in the next one.